Hello everyone and welcome to my B&B Fan Club channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Brooke stood in the dim light of the Forrester Mansion's living room, her fingers quivering as she grasped the small, crumpled image she discovered tucked into Ridge's jacket pocket. The image was blurry, but the faces were unmistakable. Ridge, smiling sweetly, his arm wrapped around a woman Brooke didn't recognize, their proximity screaming volumes about an intimacy that pierced Brooke's heart like a shard of glass. The photo's timestamp was recent, perhaps too recent, as it was taken just days after Ridge claimed to be on a work trip to Paris. The lie seared in her chest, hotter than the tears she refused to shed. She'd spent years developing a relationship with Ridge, enduring scandals, betrayals, and the ever-watchful gaze of Los Angeles' elite. But this was different. This was not a misunderstanding or a temporary error. This was a purposeful and disguised truth that shattered the fragile trust she had worked so hard to develop. She heard the front door creak open and Ridge's familiar footsteps resound through the foyer. Her pulse increased, a mixture of fear and determination settling in her bones. She'd addressed him numerous times about his wandering heart, his conflicted allegiance to her and Taylor, and his unwillingness to fully commit to one course. But tonight felt definite, as if the world had set a boundary that she couldn't cross. She slid the photo into her pocket and turned to face him, her demeanor a false sense of serenity. "Brooke," Ridge remarked, his voice warm but laced with tiredness as he relaxed his tie. "You are up late. Is everything okay?" His eyes, those deep, penetrating eyes she'd felt for decades ago, examined her face, and she wondered whether he could see the storm rising beneath her calm. "I found something," she replied, her voice steady but low, each word a deliberate step toward the truth. She took the photo from her pocket and held it out, her hand steady despite the pain in her chest. "Can you explain this?" Ridge's face turned pale as he took the photograph, his fingers brushing against hers for a brief second. He gazed at it, his jaw clenching, and Brooke watched the wheels churn in his head, looking for an excuse, a diversion, anything to soften the impact. But the hush lasted too long, and she knew. She had always understood, deep down, that Ridge's heart was a maze she could never fully navigate. "Brooke, it's not what you think," he said, but his words sounded empty and scripted. When he was cornered, he ran his hand through his hair, which she had seen 1,000 times before. This was a moment. A mistake. Her voice trembled, revealing the hurt she had tried to hide. "You mentioned you were in Paris for a conference, Ridge. You looked me in the eyes and lied. Who is she? How long has it been going on?" He paused, and it was a dagger. "Her name's Elena," he finally muttered, barely above a whisper. "She's a designer I met during the conference. It was not planned, Brooke." Brooke's piercing, bitter chuckle resonated throughout the quiet room. "Did it just happen? After everything we've gone through, do you think that's enough? That I will simply nod and forgive you because it just happened?" She took a step forward, her eyes burning. "I have given you everything, Ridge. My heart, trust, and life. And every time I think we're finally on firm ground, you find a new way to break me." Ridge grabbed for her, but she backed away, the gap between them too great to overcome. "Don't," she replied, her voice cracking. "Do not touch me. Not now." The room felt smaller, and the air was heavy with the weight of their history. Brooke's mind raced through the years, recalling every stolen moment, every heartbreaking reconciliation, and every promise Ridge made and broke. She reflected on the nights she'd spent waiting for him, the days she'd spent defending him to her family, Steffi and Hope, who'd always looked at her with sympathy, as if they knew this day would come. She remembered the wedding vows they'd exchanged not once, but several times, each one a new beginning that now seemed like a cruel joke. "I trusted you," she whispered to herself rather than to him. "I believe in us. Even when everyone said I was a fool, I believed in you." "Brooke, I love you," Ridge murmured, his voice raw and desperate. "This does not affect that. I botched up, but we can correct it. We always do." She shook her head, tears welling up. "Not this time, Ridge. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep picking up the shards of my heart and pretending they're complete. I deserve better than this. I deserve someone who chooses me every day, without hesitation." The words hung between them, heavy and definitive. Ridge's shoulders slumped, and Brooke noticed a hint of defeat in his gaze. He didn't argue or plead. Perhaps he, too, realized they had reached the end of the road. She looked away, unable to look at him anymore. The room was full of memories, laughter, disagreements, and passionate moments, but they felt like ghosts, haunting a life that no longer lived. She proceeded toward the staircase, her steps slow but purposeful, each one taking her further away from the man she had loved for so long. "Where are you going?" Ridge inquired, his voice breaking. Brooke stopped at the bottom of the steps, her hand grabbing the banister. "I don't know," she replied honestly, "but I cannot stay here. Not anymore." The next several days were a jumble of anguish and clarity. Brooke moved into a small flat in the city as a temporary sanctuary, while she planned her future actions. The silence was terrible at first, without the continual buzz of the Forrester mansion or Ridge's voice filling the voids. However, she gradually regained her sense of self. She spent hours walking down the beach, the sound of the waves soothing her wounded heart. She reconnected with old acquaintances, whom she had neglected in her all-consuming devotion to Ridge. She even resumed sketching, something she hadn't done since her first days at Forrester Creations, when she was a young girl with enormous goals and a fearless heart. Hope paid Brooke many visits, her quiet strength providing a solace she had not realized she needed. "You're going to be okay, Mom," Hope whispered one evening as they sipped tea and watched the sunset on the apartment's little balcony. "You're stronger than you know." Brooke smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I don't feel strong," she acknowledged. "I feel lost. I feel like I've spent so much of my life chasing something that was never truly mine." Hope reached for her hand and gently squeezed it. "Mom, you weren't chasing. You were loving. And there is nothing wrong with that. But now it's time to love yourself." Those words stuck with Brooke like a lifeline in the storm. She began to see the breakup not as a failure, but as an opportunity to regain the aspects of herself she had lost along the road. She pushed herself into her work at Forrester, taking on new projects with enthusiasm she hadn't had in years. She mentored emerging designers, giving the knowledge she had learned over decades in the profession. The anguish in her chest gradually faded, giving way to a timid hope for the future. Ridge, meanwhile, was a shadow of himself. The news of their split spread across the Forrester family, causing gossip and divided loyalties. Steffi, who was always loyal to her father, attempted to defend him, but even she couldn't deny the agony he had inflicted. Eric, the father, supported Brooke, his disappointment with Ridge evident. The company also felt the strain when Brooke and Ridge's once unstoppable partnership deteriorated, creating a gap in Forrester Creations' creative heart. Ridge attempted to contact Brooke, leaving voicemails that she did not respond, and sending flowers to a local hospital. He even showed up at her flat one rainy evening, his hair stuck to his brow and his eyes pleading for mercy. But Brooke remained steadfast, her resolve fortified by the memory of that snapshot, by the falsehood that had shattered everything. "I'm sorry, Ridge," she began, standing in the doorway with rain streaming from the awning above, "but I can't go back. Not this time." He nodded, his face filled with remorse, and walked away, disappearing into the rain. Brooke shut the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. For the first time, the weight of her decision felt like liberty rather than loss. Months passed and Brooke gradually rebuilt her life. She came to Milan for a fashion show, where she met Luca, a curator whose quiet confidence and genuine kindness sparked something in her that she hadn't felt in years. They talked for hours over espresso, laughing at the peculiarities of the fashion industry, and Brooke felt seen for the first time. Not as Ridge Forrester's partner, but as Brooke Logan, a woman with her own dreams and story. Back in Los Angeles, she founded a charity to help young women in the fashion business find their voices, devoting her time and energy to this cause. She spoke at events, telling her story with real honesty and inspiring those around her. And while the grief of Ridge's betrayal never went away, it became a part of her story, not the whole of it. One evening as she stood on her balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky, Brooke felt a deep peace wash over her. She had loved Ridge with all of her heart, and she had no regrets. But she was done living for him and defining herself through their love. She was Brooke Logan, and that was enough. Brooke was not terrified for the first time in years, despite the uncertainty of the road ahead. She was prepared to write the next chapter, not as Ridge's partner, but as a woman who had confronted the truth, overcome heartbreak, and found the courage to begin again. Brooke's bedroom's white curtains were softly illuminated by the early light, which was diluted by the slight fog rolling over the Los Angeles hills. She perched on the side of the bed, the silence of the room weighing against her like a weight she couldn't bear. The phone in her hand flashed with a single message, a string of words that shattered her heart in two. She had read it several times until the letters blurred into meaningless forms. But the meaning, that horrible revelation, had already etched itself deeply into her chest. Ridge had lied. It wasn't the kind of tiny fib that lovers tell to protect one another. It wasn't about forgetting dinner or missing a call. It was the kind of deception that rewrites a love's whole history. One so profound that it alters the meaning of every kiss, whisper, and promise. She struggled to breathe as the reality dawned on her. Brooke had spent many years trusting in Ridge, supporting and forgiving him. Through every betrayal, grief, and difficult scenario, she had held on to the hope that love could heal the wounds they were constantly inflicting on each other. She believed that this time would be different, that they were older, smarter, and more aware of what truly mattered. She had convinced herself that they had finally achieved peace, that the ghosts of their past had been put to rest. But now those ghosts had returned, looming between them with accusing eyes. The message was not even from Ridge. It came from someone she hadn't spoken to in years, a name that made her heart race. Taylor. The text was simple, almost soothing, but the truth behind it was harsh. Taylor had discovered something she felt Brooke deserved to know. Taylor wrote, "It wasn't meant to hurt her. It was intended to release her." Brooke initially refused to believe it. She told herself Taylor was wrong, bitter, or playing one of those old twisted games that used to destroy their lives. However, the evidence was undeniable. Taylor had supplied images and documentation, which Ridge could never explain away. The guy she loved had kept a secret from her, one so significant that it wrecked the frail basis of the life they had built together. She lowered the phone gently, her hands trembling. Even with the California sun shining, the air in the room felt frigid. Her reflection in the mirror across from her resembled someone else entirely. Empty eyes, pale lips, and a face caught between amazement and heartbreak. She remembered how many times Ridge had told her he loved her, and how he looked at her as if she were the only woman he had ever known. Were those real moments? Or was he performing for her? A guy caught up in his own web of remorse and desire? She could hear a faint clatter of plates downstairs. Ridge was making coffee, most likely humming lightly, unconscious that the world he knew was about to disappear. Brooke stood, throwing a blanket around her shoulders, but she no longer felt cold. She walked around the home like a ghost, her bare feet silent against the polished wood floors. Every photograph she passed conveyed a story. Their wedding day, the children they had raised, the parties, and the laughing. But now each image appeared to be a deception. She discovered him in the kitchen, standing by the window and pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He turned and grinned at her, that familiar look that used to make her heart skip a beat. "Morning, Logan," he murmured, using the nickname he had given her for decades. "You were still asleep when I awoke. I did not want to bother you." Brooke's throat clenched. For a minute, she wanted to pretend nothing had changed, to take the mug, sit opposite him, and discuss the day as usual. But the reality pressed harder into her chest, till she couldn't take it anymore. "Ridge," she said gently. Something in her voice caused him to halt. He turned completely toward her, his brow furrowing. "What's wrong?" She paused, studying his face for any indication of remorse or knowledge that she recognized. But he appeared calm and loving. That made things worse. "I got a message this morning," she said, her voice wavering despite her efforts to keep it steady. "From Taylor." Ridge's expression changed immediately. The color drained from his cheeks, and for the first time, she saw it, the truth in his eyes before he said anything. That momentary flicker of terror revealed everything she needed to know. "What did she say?" he asked gently, setting down the coffee pot. Brooke took a hesitant breath. "She claims to have discovered the truth concerning your disappearance to Paris last year." She replied it wasn't a business trip at all. Ridge turned away. "Brooke, she sent me proof," Brooke said abruptly, her voice breaking. "You were with her. You stayed with Taylor. You told me you were alone and needed time to clear your mind. You stated you were thinking about us and our future. But you were with her, Ridge." The silence that ensued was terrible. Ridge did not refute it. He just stood there, the weight of his own acts reflected in the creases on his face. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said quietly. "I was lost. We were constantly fighting and I believed I had already lost you. Taylor was there." She listened. Brooke laughed bitterly, tears welling in her eyes. "She listened. Is that your excuse? You misled me again because you needed someone to listen?" He took a step toward her, his hands extended. "Brooke, please. It did not signify anything. I returned to you because I adore you. You are the one I desire." "Don't say that," she wailed, jerking away. "Don't say that to me right now. You've stated that before and I always believed you. But love is not intended to feel this way. It's not meant to hurt this much," Ridge said, his voice cracking. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," she said. "You always do." The room seems to revolve around her. Every memory of them together, from the first time he kissed her to the hours they spent talking about the future and whispering vows in the dark, felt poisoned today. How many times did she forgive him? How many chances did she offer him to show that their love was worth fighting for? She had formed her life around him, hoping that one day he would realize that she was enough. She recognized with crushing clarity that he never would. Ridge attempted to grab for her again, but she stepped back. Her tears fell silently, leaving trails down her cheeks. "I can't do this anymore," she admitted. "I can't keep loving someone who keeps breaking me." "Brooke, don't." She shook her head, interrupting him. "No. This time it is over. I mean it. I cannot forgive you for this. Not again." For a long time they just stood there, two people who had loved each other through decades of turmoil, now reduced to silence and anguish. Ridge's shoulders dropped, and he looked at her with the forlorn sadness of someone who realized he had lost everything important. "I'll go," he replied gently. Brooke didn't respond. She could not. He exited the room, and a few moments later she heard the door close. The boom rang throughout the house like a final heartbeat. She collapsed to the floor, her sobbing piercing the silence. Perhaps more than a few hours had elapsed. She did not know. The sun had traveled across the sky, casting lengthy shadows over the living room. The coffee he brewed had cooled on the counter. Every room in the house still smelt like him, his fragrance, the faint hint of paint from his sketches, the scent of the life they'd built together. Brooke strolled from room to room, unable to take her gaze away from the things they shared. The wedding photo on the mantel, the letters he had written her over the years. She opened one of them with shaky fingers and read the words aloud in a weak whisper. "You're my forever, Brooke. No matter where I go or what happens, you are the love who will always bring me home." She held the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. "So why wasn't I enough?" she whispered. Night fell. The city lights twinkled beneath the hill, and she knew Ridge was somewhere looking out at the same skyline, feeling the same emptiness. But this time she didn't want to pursue him. She did not want to fight anymore. Brooke recognized in the stillness of the house that love could only withstand betrayal so many times before transforming into something twisted and cruel. She had spent her life believing in destiny, soulmates, and the notion that Ridge and she were destined to be. But perhaps destiny was not about clinging on. Perhaps it was about knowing when to let go. She sat at the window watching the stars appear one by one. Her tears had dried, leaving only tiredness behind. For the first time in years she felt a sense of clarity. The anguish remained raw and piercing, but underneath it was a quiet strength she hadn't felt in a long time. She had survived every previous storm, and she would endure this one as well. The following morning she packed a little suitcase. She didn't know where she was going yet. Maybe to see her sister, or just somewhere quiet where no one knew her name. She carefully folded her garments, almost ritualistically, and placed the ring Ridge had given her on the nightstand. It caught the light as she went away, like a small spark in the early morning. She stepped outside and the air was cool and clean. The outside appeared unchanged, but everything inside her had changed. She took one final look at the house, where she had loved, lost, and learned, before getting into her car. As she drove down the twisting road, memories flooded her head like shards from a movie she no longer wanted to see. Ridge had never told her he loved her before. The laughing of their children echoed around the garden. An unending cycle of pain and forgiveness. It was all behind her, vanishing in the rearview mirror. Brooke had no idea what lay ahead. Perhaps calm, loneliness, or a fresh start. But for the first time in her life, she was neither running toward nor away from Ridge. She was merely running towards herself. The road stretched forever before her, golden in the morning light. She cranked up the radio, and the faint hum of music filled the solitude. A tear streamed down her cheek, but she smiled through it. A little fragile grin that contained both pain and hope. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is to let go. It's understanding when to let go. Brooke's heart was still aching, but she knew deep inside that she will recover. That one day she'd wake up and Ridge's memory would no longer sting. It'd just be another chapter in her long, difficult life. Until then she'd keep driving into the sunlight, into whatever was ahead.